Welcome to Life Stories, where one forgotten letter written in crayon by a stranger comes back years later to change everything. Uh, what if the person you once comforted in passing, someone you barely remembered, never stopped remembering you? What if, in the middle of your own heartbreak, you accidentally became someone else's miracle? This is a story about a woman who said yes to a one-day favor and stepped into a house frozen by grief, only to find herself recognized by a child she didn't know and watched by a man who'd been holding on to a memory of her for years. It's about the kind of love that doesn't begin with fireworks, but with a whispered lullaby, a child's drawing, and a door left slightly open. Stay with us, because the moment she walks through that door, everything begins to unravel. Now let's begin. On a pale December morning in Willowbrook, Oregon, the snow fell like sifted flour over rooftops and frozen lawns. Ella Morgan stood motionless before a wrought iron gate, a borrowed tote of children's books slung over her shoulder, and her breath curling into the cold air like smoke. The estate beyond the gate loomed tall and pristine, not a single footprint disturbing the fresh snow on the walkway. She tightened the belt of her coat, feeling the weight of her grief settle deeper into her chest. She hadn't planned to be here. Her sister's fevered voice had come just after dawn, panicked, apologetic, pleading. One day, Ella, just watch her for one day. Now here she was, standing on the edge of a world that did not belong to her. Not the manicured hedges or the towering windows, not the silence that seemed to hum with old money and unspoken sorrow. Ella had no business in a house like this. And yet, somewhere inside, a little girl was waiting. The door opened before she knocked. A man stood framed in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal sweater that matched the storm in his eyes. His jaw was sharp, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he simply stared at her, like she was a question he couldn't quite answer. Behind him, a girl appeared, peeking around his leg, no older than 6. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement, curls bouncing as she stepped forward. "You look like Miss Starshine," she whispered. Ella blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You are," the girl said, more firmly now. "You sang the brave song." The man's brow furrowed. Ella crouched, smiling gently, though her stomach flipped with confusion. "Hi there, I'm Ella, just helping out for the day." The girl's face lit up like a sunrise. "You came anyway, even when it's cold? Daddy, can she stay?" The man, Graham Walker, she assumed, stepped aside with a slow nod. "Come in." Inside, the house was beautiful and lifeless. Vaulted ceilings, gleaming floors, glass everywhere. But no warmth, no clutter. It was like someone had tried to erase every sign of chaos, of childhood, of memory. Ella placed her coat neatly on the hook, humming softly out of habit. A melody from a lullaby, one she used to sing to her students when nap time came too fast and homesickness clung to them like damp clothes. Behind her, she felt Graham still watching. Not in a predatory way. No, this was different. His stare wasn't hunger. It was recognition. In his office down the hall, Graham sat behind a mahogany desk that looked untouched. His laptop glowed with unanswered emails, but his eyes were fixed on something else. A small silver flash drive. Slowly he plugged it in. A video file opened. Title, Be Brave Day. The screen filled with the flickering image of a preschool auditorium. Hand-drawn stars, tiny chairs, off-key singing. Then, a girl, no older than 4, curled on a bench, silent, withdrawn. And then, a woman. Blonde hair, soft voice, Ella. She knelt beside the child, whispered something, and began to sing. Not perfectly, but with heart. The kind of voice you remember when the lights go out. He had watched that clip dozens of times. No name, no context. Only the voice and the note that had come home in his daughter's backpack that day, written in pink paper and crayon letters. "You're brave, even when it feels like your heart is breaking. Your mommy loves you from the stars. Every time you smile, you shine like her. Signed, Miss Starshine." He never found her. The school said she was just a temp, a college intern. She left no forwarding address. But now, 2 years later, she's foyer carrying puzzles and paperbacks, with no idea she had once rescued his child from a grief even he couldn't reach. She didn't remember, but Maddie did. And Graham? He didn't know whether to thank her or to beg her not to disappear again. Ella moved through the house like she'd been born to mend it. She danced with Maddie in the living room, sang while making soup, folded blankets with a kind of quiet reverence. By mid-afternoon, the house no longer echoed. It breathed. And yet, behind every moment of connection, behind every burst of laughter, Ella felt something else, something watching. She tried to dismiss it as nerves or the sheer oddity of the day. But when she entered the playroom and saw a framed letter resting on a bookshelf, her letter, the one she wrote in a rush of emotion 2 years ago, it knocked the wind from her lungs. She picked it up carefully, running her fingers over the crayon stars. He had kept it. All this time, her heart began to race, not from fear, but from something more dangerous, hope. Later that night, after Maddie had fallen asleep with her bunny tucked beneath her chin and fairy lights twinkling above her bed, Ella moved toward the front door, bag in hand. Her fingers brushed the doorknob. She had told herself it was only for one day, but she turned, and there was Graham, silent in the doorway, his sleeves rolled up, a folded piece of paper in his hand. "I wanted to ask you something," he said, voice low. She opened the letter. Her words stared back at her. The same ones from 2 years ago. "I kept this," he said. "I needed to." She looked at him, tears threatening now. "You knew. You remembered me." He nodded. "You didn't just help her. You saved her. I just didn't know how to say it." Ella folded the paper, her hands trembling. "I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think anyone would ever." She broke off. "You mattered," he said, his voice almost breaking. "More than you'll ever know. What would you do if the person you once saved remembered you forever? Could a fleeting moment of kindness truly rewrite someone else's entire story?" As the snow began to fall again outside that grand, quiet home, Ella had no idea that her greatest test wasn't behind her. It was only just beginning. That night, the wind picked up outside the Walker estate, rattling the windows like the house itself was restless. Inside, Ella sat in the small reading nook off the hall, her knees drawn to her chest, still clutching the letter Graham had handed her. It was late. Maddie was asleep upstairs, her breathing soft and steady. The warmth from the fireplace barely touched the chill running down Ella's spine. She read the letter again. Not because she needed to, she'd memorized the words already, but because something inside her needed to feel them one more time. Each line was quiet and steady, like him, like the man who had stood at the edge of his own heartbreak and said nothing for 2 years, and yet kept a child's letter like scripture. Ella blinked back tears she didn't understand. She wasn't supposed to feel like this. She had agreed to a single day. She wasn't supposed to fold so easily into their lives, into their rhythms. But what terrified her wasn't how quickly Maddie had clung to her. It was how safe it felt to be needed again. In the silence, she heard footsteps. Bare, hesitant. Graham emerged from the shadows of the hallway, sleeves still rolled up, expression unreadable. "You're still awake," he said softly. Ella folded the letter and set it on the cushion beside her. "I couldn't sleep." He nodded, leaning against the doorway. "Neither could I." For a long moment, they didn't speak. The air between them was heavy, not tense exactly, but something just short of it, like a question neither knew how to ask. Finally, Ella looked up. "That day, when you saw the video, why didn't you say something then?" Graham's jaw tightened. "I didn't know who you were, just a grainy video and a letter without a name. By the time I found out your name through my assistant, you were gone. No forwarding info, no way to reach you." He hesitated. "And maybe I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" she whispered. "That if I found you, it would only be for a moment, that it would never be enough." Ella swallowed hard. A part of her wanted to lean into that silence, to let it carry them into something inevitable. But another part, an older, more guarded part, pulled her back. She rose to her feet. "I should turn in." He nodded, stepped aside to let her pass. But just as she brushed past him, his voice stopped her. "There's something else," he said. She turned. Graham reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He handed it to her with care, as if it might dissolve between their fingers. Ella opened it slowly. It was a letter from Maddie's mother. The handwriting was elegant, precise. A goodbye, written months before she passed. "For Maddie, when she's ready, and only then. I found it the week she died. Graham said, voice low. I couldn't bring myself to give it to her. She was already slipping away, closed off, silent. And then you, that day at school, something shifted, and I thought maybe someday. His voice cracked. But now Maddie keeps asking about you. She remembers that letter you wrote better than she remembers her mom's laugh, and I don't know if that makes me grateful or terrified. Ella's throat tightened as she read the letter. It was loving, it was brave, devastating. Maddie's mother had written about stars, about watching from afar, about strength. And in the last paragraph, she had written, if there is ever someone kind, someone who sings when you cannot, hold on to them because they were sent for you. Ella couldn't breathe. Later that night, she stood in the guest room, unable to sleep, the letter on the nightstand beside her. She stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. It had been so easy to say yes to one day, to pretend she was just helping out. But now the walls were closing in. This wasn't just a job anymore. It never was. She had walked into this house thinking she was doing a favor, but she was being watched long before she arrived, remembered, needed. She had become a living echo of someone else's love, someone who had died, and that realization both honored and crushed her. She wasn't Maddie's mother. She never would be. But part of her feared she was becoming a substitute, not for Maddie's sake, but for Graham's. And worse, a part of her wanted to be. The next morning, as the sun filtered pale and gold through the windows, Ella found Graham alone in the kitchen. He was making coffee, his movements slow, deliberate. I got a call, she said carefully. Lakeside Elementary. They offered me a full-time position. I have until Monday to decide. Graham stilled, the spoon pausing above the sugar jar. That's great. Congratulations. She waited. Nothing else came. So, that's it? He turned to face her, eyes dark. I don't get to decide for you, Ella. No, but you could say something. Graham stepped closer. What do you want me to say? That I'm afraid Maddie will lose you again? That I will? She stared at him, breath caught. Would that change anything? I don't know, he said quietly. Would it? If you were Ella, would you choose a life of certainty or follow the whisper of something extraordinary, even if it meant risking your heart? As the clock ticked down to Monday and the weight of too many truths settled on her shoulders, Ella had to face the one question no one could answer for her. Is it possible to belong somewhere you were never meant to stay? The snow had melted by Monday. Willowbrook, usually sleepy under its quilt of frost, had awakened with a softness in the air, as if the season itself knew something was shifting. Ella stood by her window, her phone heavy in her hand. The call was waiting. The job, safe, stable, familiar. A life she once dreamed of, back before grief hollowed her chest and rewrote what belonging meant. Downstairs, she heard Maddie's laughter bubble up through the floorboards. It was lighter now. It had changed. No longer the careful laugh of a child trying to remember how. It was natural, alive. A sound Ella never thought she'd have anything to do with. Her thumb hovered over the call button, but she couldn't press it. Instead, she walked. The estate was still quiet at this hour, Graham already at his desk, no doubt trying to lose himself in numbers and contracts. She wandered past the hallway lined with black and white photos, past the framed letter that once sat hidden in a drawer, now proudly displayed like a family crest. And then she paused. There, on a small end table, was Maddie's drawing from the week before, a crayon version of Ella, holding hands with her and Graham beneath a yellow sun and a blue sky. Above them, 3 hearts, one pink, one red, one green, all the same size. Ella stared at it for a long time. Later that day, she found Graham in the backyard. He was sanding a piece of wood, sleeves rolled, hair mussed by the breeze. There was a stillness to him, something restrained, like a man trying not to lean toward what he wanted too badly to lose. She watched for a moment before speaking. I haven't called them yet. He looked up, but didn't speak. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted. You don't have to know, he said quietly. Not yet. She hesitated, arms crossed. You say that like you're not hoping I'll stay. He set the sandpaper down, straightening. I want you to stay, but I also want you to choose that. Not because of Maddie, not because of me, because it's what you want. That's the only version of this that's real. She blinked hard. But what if I don't know where I belong anymore? What if I've already started to love this place too much to leave, and yet I still don't believe I'm supposed to be here? He stepped closer, his voice low. Then maybe that's exactly how you know you are meant to stay. That night, Ella tucked Maddie into bed. The little girl was sleepier than usual, her eyes heavy, her words slurred with exhaustion. But before drifting off, she murmured, "Did Mommy send you?" Ella froze. Maddie's lashes fluttered closed. "She said someone kind would come." The words struck like lightning. Ella stepped into the hallway, heart hammering against her ribs. She made it to the guest room before the tears came. Not from sadness, not even from confusion, but from the undeniable realization that no matter how temporary she thought her stay was, she had become something permanent, and permanence terrified her. The next morning, she packed her bag. The decision was made not in anger, not in panic, but in a quiet, aching clarity. She left a letter on the kitchen table beside a cup of black coffee, 2 sugars, no cream. "Graham, I don't know what this has been or what it was meant to be, but I know what it became. I came to your house as someone broken. I thought I was doing a favor, and I left with more pieces of myself than I ever expected to find. But I also left something behind. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was a lie I told myself to stay safe. But the truth is, I was already falling before I even realized I had a choice. Please don't tell Maddie I said goodbye. Tell her I'll write. Tell her she made me brave again. And that's something I'll carry forever." She closed the front door slowly, stepped down onto the path, and into the taxi that had pulled up just minutes before. No one ran out after her. No one shouted from the windows. And maybe that's what hurt most, that they respected her enough to let her go. Weeks passed. Ella took the teaching position. Her new classroom was bright and noisy, filled with finger paint and snack crumbs and small voices calling her Miss Morgan. It was everything she'd once thought she wanted. On paper, she was rebuilding. Day by day, hour by hour, she put the pieces back together. But sometimes in the quiet, just after recess, or the lull before pickup, she'd catch herself humming a lullaby, the one Maddie had loved. And suddenly, the room would feel too bright, too loud, too empty. One Thursday, as the rain streaked the classroom windows, the secretary appeared in her doorway with a package. "This came for you." Ella's heart stopped. The handwriting on the box was unmistakable. It was Maddie's. She opened it slowly. Inside was a small photo book, bound with glittery ribbon. Page after page was filled with stick figure memories, her reading to Maddie, Graham cooking pancakes, their trip to the farmer's market, the night they made paper stars, and at the very end, a drawing of all 3 of them, holding hands beneath the stars with the words, "Come home, Miss Starshine." Underneath the book was an envelope. Inside was a key and a note in Graham's handwriting. "We're still here. No one else can be you. If you're ready, come home." The next day, she took a leave of absence. The drive to Willowbrook felt longer than she remembered. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel the entire way. She didn't know if he'd be there, didn't know if he'd still want her. She only knew she couldn't keep pretending she'd never belonged to that house, to that little girl, to that memory. When she arrived, the lights were on. The front door was already open. Maddie bolted out before Ella had even stepped from the car, her arms flung wide, her laughter unmistakable. Ella dropped to her knees in the driveway, catching the child in her arms as tears blurred the world around them. Graham stepped onto the porch slowly, his face unreadable, but in his eyes there was something unmistakable. Not relief, not apology, home. He walked to them, quietly, carefully, then held out his hand. Ella reached for it. She didn't need words. The moment spoke for itself. Did this ending leave your heart full or aching? Or maybe a little of both? We'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. Type 100 if this story touched you. Let us know which country you're watching from, and don't forget to share this story with a friend who believes in second chances. Thank you for watching Life Stories.